Hey guys, welcome to another video. In this video, we'll be learning about some tips that you could use in your computer class 10th ICSE boards. So let's start. Throughout the video, I'll be referring to the Specimen paper of 2023, and the link to that online copy is provided in the description below. So throughout the video, I'll be referring to some questions from this paper. I have an online copy with me right now. So let's start. Now, first of all, I'll be going through the paper pattern of the Specimen paper. So basically, there are two sections. There's section A and there's section B. Section A is of 40 marks and section B is of 60 marks, right? In section A, there are two sub-questions. There's question number 1 of 20 marks, which is wholly based MCQ, and there's question number 2, which is brief questions. So we'll go through question number 1 first. So there are various questions that they could ask you. There are a variety of questions that they could ask you in MCQ-based questions. So say, for example, in the first type of questions that they could ask you, it's type of error. Identify the error in the following snippet of code. So say, for example, if you go to question number 1, section A, the 20th question, the last question, it says, name the type of error that occurs for the following statement, and there's a snippet of code provided. Now the options are syntax error, runtime error, logical error, no error. Now first of all, you have to know the meaning of syntax error, runtime error, and logical error, right? So this is one type of question that is most often asked in MCQ-based questions. The second type of questions that is asked is output-based problems, right? So say, for example, if I take a question, say, for example, right, 10th question of question number 1, section A. There's a snippet of code provided and they are asking for the output. So you have to, there are 4 options provided to you and you have to select any one of them. Let's move on to the third type of question that they may ask you, which is of definitions of words and important terms. So say, for example, let's find an important term over here. Now an important term over here is the data type which is specified, and by the way, this is the second subpart of question number 2, section A. So the question is the data type which is specified that the method does not return a value is, of course, it's void. But now if you look at the options, A is void with the capital V, B is void with no uppercase letters, C is capital void, which means that all letters are in capital, and D is Boolean. Now the correct option is void, but the real question is, because among the 4 options, 3 of them are void, so which one should we select? Now one important thing that we have to remember is that Java is a case-sensitive programming language, right? So if I say, for example, if I have the data type string, now if I write it as string, and the S is not capital, then Java will throw an error, right? Similarly, in the case of, say, for example, public static void main. Now, if I write the void as a capital V, O-I-D, then it will throw an error. But if I can just write V-O-I-D with no uppercase letters, then it is correct. So the correct option in this case is B. It's a simple definition-based question. Let's move on to the next type of question that they may ask, which is mathematical functions. Now, in mathematical functions, there are various mathematical libraries, and there are various sub-functions that they could ask. Now, one of the sub-functions is the power class and the square root class. So math.pow is a representation, a programming representation of the power class sub-function, and math.sqrt is the representation of the square root function, the sub-function of the math library class. Now, the function of math.pow, just as an example in this case, is that it finds the power of a certain number, right? So 2 raised to the power 8. If I have to find the power of 2 raised to the power 8, so I would write math.pow 2, 8, right? And if I have to find the square root of a number, say 144, so it would be math.sqrt 144. So these types of mathematical based functions are also asked in MCQ questions. So that brings us to the end of the question number 1. Now let's move on to question number 2. Now, before moving on to question number 2, I would like to say that I'm assuming that you have an online copy of the Specimen paper that I'm referring to in front of you. Because if you don't have the Specimen paper of the 2023 Class 10th ICSE board in front of you, then I'm afraid you won't have any idea what I'm talking about. The link of the Specimen paper is provided in the description below, so you could click on it and open the online copy and follow through whatever I'm saying. Okay, let's move on to question number 2. Now, the types of questions that they can ask are program-related questions. So if I select the, say, for example, 9th question, consider the following program and answer the questions given below. So basically, they would show a snippet of code and they would ask certain questions from it. So say, for example, name the global variables. What are the method variables? It's a 2-mark question and you have to answer the relevant questions with answers. Right. Now let's move on to the next type of questions that they could ask is of mathematical functions. So in question number 1, we had observed that they would ask questions related to mathematical functions. That happens in question number 2 also. So let's identify a question wherein they would ask a similar question. this would be the first question. Evaluate the expression, the first subpart of question number 2, right? So as you can see in the front of your screen, this is the provided statement. Now, a common difficulty that students face in these types of questions is that they don't know how increment and decrement variables work. So if there's a certain value that is assigned to, say, for example, in this case, it is a is equal to 10, b is equal to 5, and z is equal to 10. So there's a whole statement that is given with various plus and minus symbols, which would leave you, groggy, right? But the problem that people face, and even I faced, is that they don't know when the value increments or decrements. Now, if you're a person who understands the increment and decrement variables very well, plus x, minus minus x minus minus, etc. So this question would be a breeze for you. The second question, write Java expression for modulus x square plus xy. Now, if you know the subfunctions of the math library class very well, so this question would also be a breeze for you. And there are various other mathematical functions, questions that are related to mathematical functions. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. The next type of questions that they could ask is definition related questions. So say, for example, if I would direct you towards the 8th question. The 8th question is define boxing with an example. So this is the definition of boxing, and you have to display an example. Many times they would also ask you to define many terms. So say, for example, there's abstractions, what is constructors, define inheritance, etc. So there are these important keywords that they would ask you to define to. So you have to memorize them. Okay, and that brings us to the end of question number 2. That's the end of section A, 40 marks. Now let's move on to section B. Now in section B, they would ask you 6 questions, of which you have to attempt any 4. And each question is of 15 marks, right? Now in this case, we will be studying about the types of questions that they would ask you. Now the first type of question they would ask you is menu-based programs. Section B is all about programs. There are 4 program-based questions that you have to attempt. The first is menu-based program. This is the easiest program of them all, and 95% of all the students do attempt this program. Because so say, for example, in section B, question number 3, right? If you open your soft copy, your online copy of the specimen paper, and if you go to section B, question number 3, so it's a menu-based program because there's a class name that is provided, there are member variables that are provided, there are methods that are provided in which it is instructed what function this method performs, etc. So it's a very easy problem. It's a very easy question. So easy 50 marks. Do attempt these types of questions. And then let's move on to the next type of question that they would ask is array-based programming questions. Now arrays is a headache, but you have to go through it. There are many confusing terms. I know that it's a bit hard to grasp it, but it is very important because in section B, there are total 6 programming questions and half of them are array based. So it is a must, it is necessary to learn arrays. So say, for example, if I would direct you to question 6, define a class to accept values into a double array of size 20 and print the range of array. Range is the difference between largest and smallest elements of the array. So it's a simple array question. Define a class to accept 10 integers and arrange them in descending order using bubble sort. Print the original array and the sorted array. So sorted array, original array, bubble sort arrays, these are some terms that you have to know. If you don't know them, then you might leave the question. That is a safe option. But the problem is that if you haven't studied bubble sort and sorted or original arrays, then chances are you might have not studied arrays at all. So if I would direct you towards question 8.2, define a class to accept the names of 10 students in an array and check for the existence of the given name in the array using linear search. Here is another term, linear search. And I know each one of these terms is very difficult, but as I said before, half of the questions in the programming section are of arrays. So you have no other option. Arrays is a very important topic. Please don't forget to memorize and understand each concept of arrays. The type of questions that they would ask is loops. Questions, programming questions based on loops. So say, for example, if I may direct you to question number 4. The first part, define a class to overload the method print as follows. Void print method to print the format 1, 2, 3. So it's a pattern, as you can see. So patterns are designed by loops. If you know the fundamentals of loops, then you wouldn't have any problem attempting this question. And there is another question, question number 7, define a class to accept a string and print the same in reverse. Also print the number of words in the string. Now to go through each element of the array, it's an array, right? No, it's a string. So if in order to go through each element of the string, you have to know loops, especially for loops. Even while and do while would do, but maybe you have to learn for loops, and if you want while loops. So it is very important to learn loops, arrays, and also attempt many-based programs. So that brings us to the end of the discussion of the paper pattern. Now let's begin with how exactly to write programs in section B. Now the first tip that I would give you, or you could say trick that I could give you, is write comments. Now what I mean by comments is those double slashed statements at the end of every statement throughout the program, which explains what exactly that statement does. So say for example, when you initialize a variable, or when you initialize, say for example, you begin if condition, right? Else if ladder, or if you begin a switch statement, for loop, or you ask the user for input, or a method declaration. This is very important. This is a very important practice which gives you marks. So when the investigator. So when the invigilator is checking your paper, this seems like a very neat overall representation of your program. Because if you're blindly writing down the programs and not providing a suitable explanation for important, I'm not saying every statement, right? So say for example, in front of a bracket, you write this is the end of the snippet of code. So even the invigilator understands that. But all I'm saying is, if you can at least inform the invigilator of what exactly is happening in this part of the code, then it would be immensely helpful and you may be awarded marks. So the second tip that I could provide you with, that I could give you, is first write with pencil. Now, a bad habit of many of my friends was that they used to first attempt the program with pens, right? I don't have a pen now, but what they used to do was they used to write it with pen. But the problem was, at that point of time in exam, because there is so much pressure, the program is not completely formulated in their brain. So if they have to declare a variable, right, they would first write they would initialize all the variables, right? They would go through every important step there is in the program. And in the last, there is a step which requires the final variable. But when they go above to, write the initializer variable, they realize that there's no space left. And if they, scribble and, omit certain elements in certain things that they've written, so it would seem very untidy, right? And the overall presentation of the program is untidy and dirty. Okay, and the primary focus is to keep the invigilator happy, so that the invigilator can quickly just tick and go ahead, and you've just given a headache to the invigilator. So let's move on to the next step, which is practice programs. Practice, practice, practice makes a man perfect. Go to any website that you see on the first page of your Google homepage, right? If you search practice programs, Java, class 10, right? Icse. If you want to add certain keywords, you can, but if you just type a simple statement, practice programs, Java, class 10, and you go through every website, you practice as many programs as you can. Practice as many programs as you can, type it in your computer, compile it, write it down. Practice, practice, practice makes a man perfect. Because in the heat of the arena, in the midst of the arena, there is too much pressure, right? There is too much pressure. In the boardroom, everything is silent, the clock is ticking, and there is immense pressure on you. And in that situation, if you forget how exactly the program, if you can't grasp the foundation of the program, then for all practical purposes, you flop your computer program, your computer boards. So it would be helpful if you practice as many programs as you can. So let's move on to a fourth tip, which is the flow of the program. Now what I mean by the flow of a program is that every program has its structure. There are 4 substructures that constitute a proper program. Now the first substructure is a variable initialization, right? Any variable that you use throughout the program is already initialized in this substructure. Let's move on to the second substructure, which is the user input, wherein you ask the user to input any value that he/she likes, right? So which could go into scanner.scan is equal to new scanner part, or the question has already given you values to work with. Then we go to the third substructure, which is the calculation or shuffling or sorting. Now what happens in the third substructure is the crux of what the question is asking you to do. Any calculation, say for example, calculating a bill or sorting elements through an array, is done in the third substructure. It's the core of the program. And then finally, the fourth structure is the output. And then the program is over. So this is what a proper program looks like. These are the 4 substructures. I'll just go through it again. It is the variable initialization. It is the user input. It is the calculation or shuffling or sorting. It depends whether it is simply a calculation bill-based program or it is an array. And then finally, the fourth substructure, the last substructure, which is the output. So system.println, and you output your values or output values. So let's move on to the fifth tip. Only write what is given or asked in the question. So say for example, let's take a small example. In the question, there is a array that is provided to you with inbuilt elements, which contain, so there is an array which contains 5 elements, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? These are numbers in separate indexes and which constitutes a single array. And the program is asking you to work with that array, right? But for some strange reason, you've completely skimmed over that part and you've automatically assumed that you have to ask the user for input. The program has given you elements to work with, but you've completely ignored that because you were distracted. You didn't read the question properly. And you've automatically assumed that we have to use the scanf statement. When we have to use the scanf statement, immediately the question is wrong because that's not what the question was asking about. The invigilator will cut your marks automatically. So please read the question carefully. So that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you learned and enjoyed this video. I would post another video in the upcoming few days, which would cover easy and difficult topics to do in computer science. So I'll meet you in that video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.